Why nobody feels emotionally safe anymore. There's a reason so many people today feel anxious in relationships. And it's not because humans suddenly became harder to love. It's because modern life slowly destroyed emotional safety without most people noticing. A lot of people today know how to flirt, know how to text, know how to attract attention, know how to appear confident, but very few people know how to make someone feel emotionally safe. And psychology explains why that matters more than almost anything else. Because attraction might create excitement, but emotional safety is what creates peace. And modern relationships are filled with excitement, while starving for peace. That's why so many people feel emotionally exhausted after dating now. Not because they don't meet enough people, but because every interaction feels emotionally unpredictable. Nobody knows where they stand anymore. One day someone acts deeply interested. The next day they disappear emotionally. One day communication feels intense. The next day it becomes cold and distant. And after enough experiences like that, people stop relaxing emotionally around each other. They become guarded, careful, always analyzing behavior, always trying to predict emotional shifts. And eventually relationships stop feeling safe and start feeling psychologically stressful. You can see this everywhere now. People overthink text messages for hours, read emotional meaning into response times, feel anxiety when someone suddenly changes tone. Modern dating created emotional instability people rarely talk about honestly. Because deep down, many people are terrified of abandonment now. Even people who appear emotionally confident. And social media made this much worse. The human brain constantly searches for emotional certainty. But modern technology created permanent emotional comparison. People can now instantly see who someone follows, who liked their photos, who viewed their stories, who gives attention to them. And that creates psychological insecurity humans were never designed to process constantly. Relationships used to exist mostly in private emotional space. Now relationships exist partially in public digital space too. And that changes trust dramatically. People start comparing themselves to invisible competition constantly. And eventually emotional safety disappears. Because safety requires emotional calm. But modern relationships rarely feel calm anymore. They feel stimulating, fast, unpredictable, emotionally intense. And people confuse intensity with love all the time. But intensity is often anxiety, not connection. Real emotional safety feels different. It feels quiet, consistent, predictable, safe enough for someone to emotionally relax around you. But modern culture accidentally made consistency seem boring. That's one of the most dangerous psychological shifts happening right now. People became addicted to emotional spikes. Fast replies, attention, validation, excitement, drama, hot and cold behavior. Because emotionally unstable situations create dopamine unpredictability. And unpredictability is psychologically addictive. That's why toxic relationships often feel impossible to leave. Not because they feel emotionally safe, but because emotional inconsistency creates obsession. Healthy connection feels calmer. And modern brains sometimes mistake calmness for lack of attraction. Especially people raised on constant stimulation. This is why emotionally healthy relationships can initially feel boring to emotionally overstimulated people. Because their nervous systems became trained for chaos. And social media accelerated this problem massively. People today consume endless romantic content online. Perfect couples, luxury lifestyles, idealized attraction, cinematic romance moments. And slowly, real human connection starts feeling less emotionally stimulating by comparison. Normal intimacy loses emotional impact. Patience feels harder. Attention spans weaken. People expect emotional perfection constantly. And eventually relationships become performance instead of connection. A lot of people today are no longer dating naturally. They're managing perception, trying to appear desirable, trying not to appear too attached, trying not to seem emotional. trying not to lose power. And all this emotional calculation destroys vulnerability, which destroys emotional safety. Because vulnerability requires risk. You cannot emotionally connect deeply with someone while constantly protecting your ego. But modern culture rewards emotional detachment. People are praised for acting unbothered, acting emotionally unavailable, acting hard to read, acting independent all the time. And slowly, genuine emotional openness starts disappearing, especially among younger people. A lot of people secretly crave deeper connection, but are terrified of emotional exposure. So they stay emotionally guarded while hoping someone magically understands them anyway. And that creates loneliness inside relationships. Not physical loneliness, emotional loneliness. The feeling of being emotionally unseen even while next to someone. That's becoming incredibly common now. And honestly, many people don't realize how emotionally defensive they've become. Some people can't fully relax during affection anymore. Some people expect abandonment automatically. Some people panic when communication patterns change slightly. Because modern relationships train people to emotionally anticipate disappointment. And once the nervous system stops feeling safe, the brain starts prioritizing self-protection over connection. That's when people begin withdrawing emotionally, testing each other, avoiding vulnerability, creating distance, or sabotaging relationships before attachment becomes too deep. Not because they don't care, but because emotional pain feels psychologically dangerous now. Especially for people who experienced emotional inconsistency repeatedly. In modern dating culture, normalized emotional inconsistency everywhere. Ghosting, breadcrumbing, situationships, temporary attention, emotional convenience. People became emotionally replaceable. And the human nervous system struggles deeply with that reality. Because humans were built for emotional stability, not endless emotional uncertainty. That's why so many people today feel emotionally tired even when they're constantly talking to others. Because communication is not the same thing as emotional safety. You can text someone all day and still feel emotionally anxious around them. You can receive attention constantly and still feel emotionally alone. Because emotional safety comes from consistency, presence, honesty, calmness, trust. And modern culture slowly made those qualities rare. Especially online. Online communication removed emotional nuance from relationships. People interpret tone through screens now. Project fears onto silence. Overanalyze delayed replies. Create stories in their heads constantly. And anxiety grows inside emotional ambiguity. That's why simple reassurance became incredibly powerful today. A calm conversation. A predictable presence. Someone emotionally honest. Someone emotionally available. Those things feel rare now. And maybe that's the real reason modern relationships feel so exhausting. Not because people stopped wanting love, but because very few people feel emotionally safe enough to experience it fully anymore. Everyone is protecting themselves, protecting their ego, protecting their pride, protecting themselves from disappointment. But protection also blocks intimacy. And eventually people become emotionally isolated while surrounded by attention. Which is one of the saddest psychological realities of modern life. Because deep down, most people don't actually want endless options. They want emotional peace. Someone they don't have to emotionally perform around. Someone they can fully exhale around. Someone who feels emotionally safe. And maybe that's what people are truly searching for now. Not perfection. Not status. Not stimulation. Just emotional safety in a world that slowly forgot how to create it.